now, for your entertainment pleasure, an audio murder mystery starring a full cast of suspects. The Death of Dr. Davidson. Inspector McTavish begins interviewing the family members one by one, trying to determine who had the strongest motive, or the strongest alibi. We find him in the dining room, sitting down to speak with...
Mr. Smythe, thank you for joining me.
Of course, I always cooperate with the authorities.
Commendable. One might think your attempted escape this morning belies that sentiment, of course.
Escape? I resent that. I was trying to...
Forgive me, I misspoke. Perhaps you were merely going for a walk.
I have urgent business out of town. Ask my wife. I told her this morning it was imperative I leave immediately.
I see. And what sort of business takes precedence over a murder investigation?
I had nothing to do with any murder.
That's not what I asked, sir.
I mean finance. High finance. I could explain further, but I doubt you'd understand.
I'm sure you're right. Tell me, you were with the others when the body was discovered?
We all heard Hannah scream, and we ran upstairs to see what was wrong.
And that's when you discovered the body?
I didn't. I came in after the others. I had been waiting in the hall, since the study's so small, but I heard everyone gasp and cry out, and so I came in to see what the trouble was.
And what happened then?
Someone pointed out the cup on the floor, and Oliver said it smelled like almonds. I didn't know what that signified, until Sadie asked him, and he said, cyanide.
Mr. Forrester identified the smell as cyanide?
Yes, absolutely. He knew right away. He seemed very familiar with it. He was like a military commander, ordering everyone around, telling Dulcie to go get Kitty, telling Rodney to phone the police.
So, Mrs. Davidson wasn't in the room either?
No, she rarely associates with the family if she can help it. When she came in, it looked like she was going to faint, so Oliver ordered us all out of the room. He locked the door and told us to go downstairs to wait.
He locked the door? To Dr. Davidson's study?
No, actually it was the bedroom door. The study adjoins the bedroom, and we all went out that way. Come to think of it, you are right. It is odd that Oliver should have a key to Davidson's room.
Did I say it was odd?
But clearly it is. And Hannah said her key to Davidson's bedroom was missing from her keyring. Dios mío. He must have taken the key from her keyring to let himself into the bedroom and kill him.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Mr. Smythe.
Of course. It's just he had a motive too.
Indeed.
Dr. Davidson called us here last night to make an announcement. You see, he told us... I mean to say...
He told you...
Well, I suppose it will come out when you talk to the others. He told everyone that he was going to change his will and cut us all out. He was so angry and insulting, he shook with rage as he spoke. He said he had been mistreated by his family for too long, and that he was going to sell the house and give his estate to charity.
Well now, how interesting.
But he said something about Oliver in particular. He said he could have Oliver disbarred for something, and that he really ought to for the public good. And I swear I saw Oliver skulking about in the hallway last night. So you see, it's clear that...
Mr. Forrester claims that you are not who you say you are. Care to comment on that?
I don't know what he's talking about. I changed my name to the English version when I left Spain. That's not a crime.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Smythe. You've been very helpful. That will be all for the moment.
Do you want me to go get him? I'd be happy to escort him in here for you.
Much obliged, sir, but I think I should speak with one of the Davidsons. You are married to Dr. Davidson's eldest daughter, yes? Be so good as to send her in next, please.
I would like to be here when you question my wife.
It's important that I speak to everyone individually, sir, please. Oh, and Mr. Smythe.
Yes?
No more attempts to leave the residence for business or any other reason. Understood?
Next, to join the inspector, Marlena glides in and takes a seat across from McTavish at the dining room table. She lights a cigarette and regards him suspiciously.
Good morning, Mrs. Smythe. Let me again express my condolences on your loss.
Thank you. It was a terrible shock.
I will try to make my inquiries brief. You were there when Dr. Davidson's body was discovered, yes?
Yes. Hannah, our housekeeper, had gone upstairs to wake him, and we heard a dreadful scream. We all hurried upstairs, and well, there he was.
And it was clear that your father was dead.
Quite. I asked my brother-in-law to check him regardless, just to be sure. But with the foaming at the mouth and his cyanosis, it was clear.
Cyanosis?
Forgive me, his skin was rather blue. I was a nurse during the Great War, you see, and one doesn't forget the look of death, I'm afraid.
Indeed. And you, alone, knew he had been poisoned with cyanide?
Look, Inspector McTavish, is it? Let's not beat about the bush. I know you have to interrogate all of us and look for the culprit among us. Let me assure you, I had nothing to do with my father's death. I simply recognized the smell of cyanide and put two and two together, as any sensible person would.
As your brother-in-law did?
It's a common fact that cyanide smells of almonds, at least among educated people.
And is Mr. Forrester in the medical field as well?
He's an attorney. He was my father's attorney for many years. He's a brilliant man, very well read. Look, why are you asking me about my sister's husband? Why aren't you talking to her about him, or to him directly? I can't imagine what I could add to the investigation if you're looking at poor Ollie.
I am merely gathering information at this point, Mrs. Smythe. I understand that your father made some rather startling announcements last night.
Well, I see you've gathered quite a bit of information already. No doubt thanks to my hothead husband. Yes, he did. He blustered on a bit, felt a bit sorry for himself, made some vague threats about changing his will.
Your husband said Dr. Davidson was going to sell the house and leave everything to charity. Is that how you remember it?
Something like that.
And that he was going to reveal something that would see Mr. Forrester disbarred.
You can't believe a word my father says. He was a foolish old man, with far too high an opinion of himself. Oliver had no reason to fear disbarment. That's quite absurd.
And yet, Mr. Forrester did have a key to your father's bedroom door.
I beg your pardon?
He locked the bedroom door after you all left the room. He must have had a key.
Well, I don't recall that. Perhaps the key was already in the lock. I don't know.
Do you happen to know why your husband was trying to leave the premises this morning?
I have no idea. Hadn't you better ask him?
One last question for now, Mrs. Smythe. Do you happen to know the combination to your father's wall safe?
Goodness, you do jump around. Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I used to help him run his practice and deal with his affairs before he hired Dulcie. Naturally, I knew the combination to his safe.
And Dulcie is?
His secretary.
I see.
She was here last night, too.
And the safe? You were surprised to see that it was open and empty?
Was it open? It escaped my notice. My father's body rather monopolized my attention.
Would you happen to know if your father kept an inventory of the contents of his safe?
Yes, of course. I can find it for you if you like.
That would be very helpful. One last question for now, Mrs. Smythe. Did you and Mr. Smythe retire together for the evening?
What kind of question is that?
I'm simply trying to determine everyone's movements last night. Were you together all night?
Yes. Will that be all, Inspector?
Just out of curiosity, do you have any idea who might have killed your father?
I can't imagine any of us doing such a terrible thing. Certainly none of the family could have stooped to such barbarity.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The only non-family members present last night were Mrs. Higginbotham, the housekeeper, and this Dulcie, Dr. Davidson's secretary?
That's right. But Hannah's been with us for many years. She's as good as family. And Dulcie's just his secretary. I can't imagine her having experienced enough of him to want him dead. In fact, there was another non-family member there last night. Kitty.
You mean Mrs. Davidson? Surely she's considered family.
Lord knows I've tried to make her feel like one of us, but she's a cold one, that girl. I wouldn't be surprised if Papa's threat to divorce her was all the excuse she needed.
He threatened to divorce her and cut her out of the will?
He seemed adamant. She was in tears, I tell you, rather undignified about it.
Thank you, Mrs. Smythe. That will be all, for now.
I really must say, Inspector, I hope you'll be more delicate with my sister and brother. This interrogation is really quite unnecessary. It couldn't be more obvious that none of us would have killed our own father.
It is rather less obvious to me at this point, madame, but I will endeavor to keep my questions delicate, as you say. Thank you, Mrs. Smythe. Please, ask Mrs. Forrester to join me next.
What will Sadie Forrester have to say? Will McTavish begin to suspect Dulcie? Don't miss the next episode as more suspects are questioned.